What is parasitic design? You've probably heard the phrase before, either in relation to video games, collectible card games, or tabletop war games. Players will say this update is parasitic design, or that system or mechanic is parasitic, but what does it actually mean? How does it happen? How does it affect games once it's in them, and what can we do to prevent it happening more? Let's discuss. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Hayes. I love all types of games, from video games like MMORPGs to card games like Magic the Gathering, or tabletop battle games like Warhammer 40k, especially tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. One other thing all these games have in common is they're rather complicated. They have an intense list of rules behind them, and they're all built up of various game design systems. Some of these games have core systems, things that are super fundamentally important to the game, the foundations the games are built from, inherent to the gameplay experience. The games also contain secondary systems, things that link to the core systems and enhance it, or have synergy with other secondary systems and allow complex interactions to happen within the game. Unfortunately, some of the games also have parasitic systems. These are ones that leech from the core mechanics and don't enhance them. They take from the game without giving anything specifically back. Let's have a discussion about what parasitic design systems are and why they are bad. Before we begin, consider dropping a like on the video or subbing to the channel. Ring the bell for all the future notifications. As usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel going. More on how you can support at the end. For now, let's begin. To understand what parasitic design is, we first need to understand the more base and essential levels of design in a game, the core design. So let's take a look at one of my favourite MMOs and identify a few core design elements. This is old school RuneScape. It's a third-person MMORPG where you click to move. Your character moves on a tiled grid, so movement on a tiled grid is a core system of this game. If you removed that, it would no longer be RuneScape. You can also carry 28 items in your inventory, equip items to specific parts of your body, and interact with the world by clicking on things. The combat system is based on in-game ticks of 0.6 seconds, and attacks happen every few ticks based on your equipped weapon. All of these systems are core parts of the game. Remove them and you fundamentally change what the game is. Core mechanics are the foundation your game is built upon. Change them, you change your entire game. A quick side note, some of you may have noticed my old school RuneScape inventory was quite valuable. That's because YouTuber Callum Upton recently held a 24-hour Twitch stream where he raised money for charity. He streamed continuously for an entire day and raised over £2,500. He ended the Twitch stream with quite a risky gamble. He decided to duel me in old school RuneScape and risk his entire bank. This mug is to commemorate Callum doing that fantastic Twitch stream and raising £2,500 for charity. It is in no way to remind Callum that he lost 338,238,593 coins worth of value to me. Anyway, all games have their own core mechanics, and identifying them is usually a case of asking, what is the absolute base minimum I can take this game down to without changing the experience it's trying to give me? Once you've established the core mechanics of a game, you can begin to look at the synergistic mechanics, things that interact with the core systems and enhance them. Mechanics that directly affect or are affected by the core elements of your game. Let's look at RuneScape. Moving around the world is a core mechanic. Running increases your movement speed for a short while, but it drains and then recovers. The run mechanic has synergy with movement, it enhances it. Within RuneScape you have the agility skill. The higher your agility, the more shortcuts you can take in the game, saving travelling time. So the agility skill directly links to the movement mechanic. But your inventory core mechanic is engaged as well, because each item has weight, and the more you're carrying, the higher the chance you'll fail an agility obstacle, and the slower your run energy recharges. So the core mechanic of click a tile to move has several synergistic mechanics linked to it. Run energy moves you faster, the agility skill opens up shortcuts and recharges your run energy, and higher carried item weight reduces your agility success and decreases your run energy. These systems all interact with each other and all relate back to the core mechanic of movement, and importantly, while these systems could exist independently of other secondary systems and only interact with the core mechanic of movement, they have been actively designed to support the core mechanic and all other secondary mechanics that interact with it. They enhance more than just themselves and work with multiple in-game mechanics. This means it's synergistic, not parasitic. It's important to understand that just because a mechanic causes negative things to happen to you as a player in the game does not mean it's parasitic. An enemy hitting you and you losing health is not parasitic design. You running and losing run energy is not parasitic design. Parasitic design is when it doesn't have synergy with systems outside of itself. So let's have a look at what happens when design goes from synergistic to parasitic. One of the most important design aspects of synergistic design is being backwards compatible. If a new system is introduced into a game, it needs to interact with and affect older systems. It needs to relate to the core gameplay loop and core mechanics. It needs to exist within the already complex interaction matrix of the game's systems. With parasitic design, the system often exists independently of other systems, yet requires support from other systems to survive. It leeches from the core mechanics of a game and yet doesn't actively give anything back to them. It detracts, it doesn't enhance. This is why we refer to it as a parasite. Some of the hallmarks of parasitic design are: it's often created later in a game's life and is not backward compatible with other, more established systems. It often requires inputs from other game mechanics or systems to survive, yet provides little value to those systems itself. It often exists within a vacuum of game design, either a different physical space within the game or a mini-game that's not related. Nothing related to the parasitic system is relevant outside of a very specific or specialized area or time frame. Or, and this is probably the most telling aspect of a parasitic system, it could be removed from the game and nothing would be affected. Let's look at some examples. The term parasitic design, despite being a general descriptor of this style of design, was widely popularized by Magic the Gathering designer Mark Rosewater, where he uses it to describe the design of cards that cannot go into any deck without detracting from the deck, or requiring very specific cards in the deck to set up and work. In short, the card doesn't add to the core mechanics of Magic and doesn't interact with multiple systems. It only interacts and works when built around. The most popular example of this is the Splice onto Arcane mechanic, which requires you to be running arcane cards and does nothing without them. You could remove Splice onto Arcane from Magic and very little about Magic would change. When an MMORPG releases an expansion, they often come bundled with parasitic design elements, because designing a parasitic system that the existing systems must warp and bend around to make work is actually much easier than designing an evergreen system that naturally integrates itself into the core gameplay of your game. Remember the Heart of Azeroth in World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth? It was a necklace item you equipped and then powered up. Suddenly every dungeon was about collecting Azerite to power it up, unlocking new powers on it, and your Heart of Azeroth levels would provide new combat buffs or debuffs. Everything in the expansion was about the Heart of Azeroth. You literally got given it at the start and everything was about making it more powerful. It was a new item that brought a new mechanic with it that the expansion was almost entirely built around. And then Shadowlands happened and the Heart of Azeroth was forgotten. So for a brief time, World of Warcraft had a very specific item which required dungeons to be run, resources to be found, and time to be dedicated to leveling it up. And in exchange for all your effort focused on this singular time-gated mechanic, it would affect combat in a very minor way while you were wearing it. And then Shadowlands released and the Heart of Azeroth was instantly forgotten about and no longer relevant. And the Heart of Azeroth isn't even the first time they've done this. World of Warcraft does this quite a lot. Every expansion they release, especially the recent ones, takes the core systems of the game and then adds in a bit of parasitic design that will be relevant for this system alone. Remember building your garrison in Warlords of Draenor and then the garrison becoming irrelevant? Remember restoring your artifact weapon in Legion and then the artifact weapon becoming irrelevant? And then filling up your Heart of Azeroth and then that becoming irrelevant? It's basically par for the course right now, because developing new core integral systems is hard. Developing a parasitic system you can throw away at the end of 2 years and then just add another one on, that's easy. A parasitic design mechanic is an aspect of gameplay, a system or an update that requires other already established systems to support it, often taking time and resources away from those core systems, but not actually ingratiating itself into any of them in any meaningful way. It is a sideshow for a few months. It is the next hot trend that will inevitably die. It's a designer saying, hey, wouldn't this be cool? And putting something into the game that needs the game to exist but doesn't actually ever become an important part of the game. I've been playing and really enjoying Warframe for a while now, since I made the worst MMO ever episode on it, actually, and as great as the core gameplay is, I'm starting to see these parasitic design systems everywhere. New ideas have been added over time but never expanded upon. New systems half built and then abandoned. Still there, but not contributing. One of the worst aspects of parasitic design is how designers will add in a parasitic system, players won't respond well to it, and then instead of removing it, they will just add in another. This is one of the major causes of feature creep. Incomplete, non-fleshed out, shallow systems that don't enhance the core game design being left in a game, and bloating out the in-game systems and confusing the hell out of new players who discover them and then don't realise they're abandoned. Parasitic design is one that needs the game to exist but doesn't enhance the game in any meaningful way. It's a system that takes from others without giving back, or it's one that must be specifically built around and support it, because without the additional support, it would not survive on its own merits. This is why when Dungeoneering released originally in RuneScape, people called it parasitic, and I can understand that complaint. It existed separately from the main landmass and required skills to be trained to be good at, but having a high Dungeoneering level didn't make you good at anything other than more Dungeoneering. This is why people said it shouldn't have been a skill, but a minigame. Skills in RuneScape all interact with each other. Minigames don't need to, they can exist on their own merits. Dungeoneering required support from every skill to exist, but didn't supply any other skill with support. It didn't enhance anything outside of itself. Now, however, it's been updated and become much less parasitic. There are resource dungeons around the world that require a Dungeoneering level to get into, but it has been woven into the main game design over time. It has gained its synergy slowly. The main reason parasitic design exists and will continue to exist is because once a designer has built the core systems of their game and worked out the intricate connection matrices between all of the secondary systems, they step back, look at their game as a whole, and then players say, add more. Add more game. And game designers think it would take a long time to add a new core system and work out a way that it affects all the other systems. But it would be quite easy to add a parasitic system I can just remove later. It's like building a pizza. You start off with a decent base, then you add the sauce, then you add the cheese, then you add the toppings. You step back and say, this is complete. If someone looks at you and says, hey, I've eaten all the pizza, make it different, you could go back and remake the base, remake the sauce, remake the cheese, but that would be complicated. What's easier is just adding more toppings, without stopping to think, are these toppings actually making the pizza better? Or am I just adding them because people demand I add something? It's highly likely that parasitic design will unfortunately continue, because designing a temporary system that is supported and propped up by your core game and can be removed at any time without actually affecting your core game is much easier than adding something new to your core game and enhancing every aspect of it. Parasitic design is lazy. It's designed to be temporary, and it's one of the fastest ways to annoy your player base when they realise, hang on, this system won't actually matter in a year. If you're designing a game, add your core systems, then add synergy, and leave the parasitic design on the drawing board where it belongs. Cheers for watching. Another massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel alive. You can support from just £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and Discord. And as always, have a great day.